So this idea that long distance running is good for the masses is a big problem. And there's a lot of reasons we can get into and talk about why. But the first indication is the rate of overuse injuries among regular runners is absolutely stunning and embarrassing. Yale University says 50% of regular runners get an overuse injury every year. Wake Forest says 73%. Research from Europe says 37%. So we're going to say around half of all runners are sidelined every year with Achilles tendonitis or shin splints or knee problems or a lower back tweak or whatever. And that's because of the pounding, the incorrect form that's facilitated by the use of the shoes, and a lack of baseline functional fitness that would allow one to run and benefit from it. Now, when I was a high school and college runner, I was a kid, I ran around, I was super fit, and so I jumped right into training and I thrived and I did well and it didn't break down my body. But to be able even to run a short distance, you got to be in really good shape and you have to run at a pace that's comfortable. And we can talk about fat max heart rate. I don't want to go without Casey getting a word in here, but we'll determine who should run and who shouldn't.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. We'll definitely be getting to that heart rate stuff. I've told you before on previous episodes that we've done, I've worked with metabolic carts and could validate anecdotally that the fat max heart rate, the formula or validating on like a VO2 max test is legit. It definitely adds up and makes a lot of sense for everything that I've seen with the data over the years. So we'll definitely be talking about that. In the book, you guys do a great job talking about the history of how we got here. And that history also includes something you've already mentioned, the marathon, which I think is fascinating. I was made aware of this a few years ago reading The Road to Sparta by Dean Karnazes, which
Oh, great
I
book.
know you
Yeah.
guys love. Yeah, fascinating book, which talks about like ultra marathoning. And everybody knows, first of all, what you just said about, running not being as good for you as you think. Like 100 people out of 100 people I would stop on the street would tell me I was nuts if I told them that. And then secondly, everybody seems to know the history of the marathon, yet the story is completely different than what most people think.
You want to tell it, man? I would love to hear it. I can tell it. It's just such a shocker.
Well, I mean, so the story is Phidippides. I have a
Pheidippides, yeah.
Phidippides. Yeah, yeah. Runs from the battle site where they had the battle back home to, is it Athens, which is a certain distance, and gets there and says it's at Nike, right?
Nike, Nike, Neni Kayam. It means rejoice we conquer. And then he dropped dead.
Drop dead
And
right there.
so his distance was from the city of Marathon and the legendary Battle of Marathon to Athens. So he ran, and this is a real person. Phidippides is a legendary Greek foot messenger. They call him Hemerodromus, and his job in the army was to relay messages and engage in strategy. The Hemerodromus had a huge advantage over a horse because they could go over hilly terrain faster and spread the message and get ready for battle. So he did this historic run from Marathon to Athens, around 26 miles, and then announced victory and dropped dead. This is the foundation for the modern day marathon race of 26 miles, which first came about in the reenactment of the modern Olympic Games in 1896. They said, hey, let's do a marathon to honor the great Greek messenger from ancient times, Phidippides. Okay, so it's 26 miles. It jumped into the Olympics and came in every Olympics since then. And then, of course, branched out into be this cultural phenomenon that it is today. 2024, the New York City Marathon had the all time record. I believe it was 54,000 finishers of one race. They all ran 26 miles. Okay, so here's the big problem that we're going to get to. The punchline and the fallout from it is that the famous run never happened. It was made up in an 1879 poem by Robert Browning, who took liberties with actual Greek history and just made this story up to create a fanciful poem that was referenced then to throw the marathon in the Olympic Games. So what really happened was this amazing athlete, Phidippides, ran 153 miles from Athens to Sparta to request the help of the Spartans in battle. He got there, he found out that they were on religious holiday. He had to turn around after a short break and run back to Athens and say, don't go to battle yet because we don't have help from the Spartans. They're on vacation. And so this guy ran 306 miles in 72 hours. And in Dean's book, what he did was recreate that initial route, that 153-mile race from Athens to Sparta. It's an organized event. And Dean was also cool because he decided to do it with ancient nutrition. So he had figs, wrapped up cheeses, and
That's
whatever.
right.
I believe he used his modern running shoes, or he was going to use the sandals, and then he changed his mind. But anyway, this whole phenomenon that's the foundation for modern day competitive event is a falsehood. And so why is that important besides the cute story? Um, we're setting an arbitrary distance and proclaiming it's the ultimate fitness achievement in the endurance community. I contend right now, if we just changed our minds and said, hey, look, a half marathon's a long freaking way to run too. Let's make that a marathon and just call it a marathon. It's 13 miles instead of 26. We'd all be better off. We could go out to brunch earlier in the day, including all the spectators that wait around for their runner to come in and raise their arms at the finish, because running 26.2 miles on pavement is completely antithetical to short-term and long-term human health. And this is not just an opinion from some guy on your podcast. It's validated by, they have research where the vast majority of runners who finish a marathon, if you immediately took them to the emergency room, they would present as having myocardial infarction. They would present as a heart attack patient if they took their blood values and looked at their liver enzymes and their cardiac enzymes and the fallout and the initial damage and destruction from pushing the body that hard and incurring that much impact trauma. And so immediately it's super bad for your body. Okay, that's the trade-off I'm going to make if I push myself really hard. But as we reference in the book in great length, those who engage in long distance marathon training for years and decades have increased disease risk factors from someone who engages in fitness in a more sensible manner. There's a viral TED Talk on YouTube by Dr. James O'Keefe, one of the leaders of this excess endurance exercise hypothesis. The YouTube talk is titled Run for Your Life, but Not Too Far and at a Comfortable Pace. And he talks about this sweet spot, the inverted U-shaped curve, where a couple few hours a week of comfortably paced cardio gives you an A plus in terms of health benefits of being active and disease protection from the number one killer on planet Earth today, which is cardiovascular disease. So all you have to do is get off your butt and engage in a good amount of walking over the course of a week, short walks and long walks, all counting up together. Or if you like exercise and you want to get on the Stairmaster a couple days a week and go here, go there, go for a hike on the weekend, you're dialed. You got an A plus. And then as you extend out beyond this sweet spot of optimal cardiovascular conditioning, that's when you bring in the risk factors for overuse injury and cardiac problems over the long term.
Very good point. I remember coming across him after hearing you reference him as well, and I went back and saw that TED Talk and listened to some of his content, which I absolutely agree with. He's a great person to follow in that space. And yeah, as we're referencing, the history of all this stuff, we think back to like the 1950s, 1960s, where we went from like, if you saw somebody running down the street, you would think like they were insane, like something's going on, or you need to start running for
Yeah.
something.
What did they steal? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To now this idea, we see people running around all over the place all the time. We don't give it a second thought. What was it that made running be something that was only for a select few, the elite athletes? Very few people would ever even dream of running 26.2 miles, regardless of whether it was based on a historical event or not. To
That's
where we are
right.
today, when anybody can join. And I believe this is true, that like the BMI of a finisher of a marathon is almost identical to the average BMI of a normal human anyway, where like it's not necessarily like a weight loss. How do we get to that place in more modern times?
Yeah, yeah. So a few things come up, and one of them is you set me up nicely for the title of chapter one in the book is Opening the Floodgates in One Fell Swoosh. So the invention of the elevated cushion running shoe by Nike in 1973 or so, and bringing that to market enabled a poorly adapted, poorly physically conditioned person to slide on these shoes and take off running down the street without the initial severe penalty of running with poor form that might happen if you were running in the rudimentary shoes that came before the before the Nike invention. And Nike invented him, Bill Bowerman, the coach of the great University of Oregon runners. He invented these so that his elite runners, the guys who were training for the Olympics, could run more miles with a little more padding and not keep getting injured. So they're pushing the very edge of human capability with these crappy shoes. Now they have a nice waffle sole with the cushion, and they can feel better and continue running and training and getting faster. But as the company grew and the marketing campaigns like Just Do It, now we all became inspired to say, wow, maybe I could enter one of these events too. And 5Ks and 10Ks flourished. And then the marathon participation grew like crazy. And this was known as the running boom. And there's other checkpoints like Frank Shorter won the gold for the USA in 1972 Olympics in Munich in the marathon. So that was amazing to see a USA guy for the first time, or the first time in decades, win the marathon. Jim Fixx wrote a book that became a bestseller, The Complete Book of Running, and glorifying this amazing activity where you could, get away from the smoking and the drinking and the pills and all the things that, 70s culture where we people were just not interested in fitness. And then the fitness boom occurred. At the same time, Jane Fonda started getting us doing aerobics and selling the VHS tapes, and all this great stuff occurred to get America and the world more active.